Hey guys, and welcome back to Bayside Online. We are so happy that you have chosen to join us for service. My name is Morgan, I'm on the team here at Bayside, and we're really glad that you chose today to tune in because we are actually starting a brand new series called For Better or For Worse. This series is tackling everything marriage, relationships, singleness, dating, engagement, whatever series of life that you're in, whatever season of life that you're in, we believe that God has something for you today. Pastor Mark is bringing us into our first message, which is all about the concept of marriage. What is marriage actually for? And if marriage is really hard right now, then what are the things that we can do to make it easier? How do you become better friends, better partners, better lovers? All of that is for you today. So we do invite you to tune in, sit back and relax. You can jump in the comment section, let us know where you're watching from, but we really do hope that you enjoy today's service.
For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part.
To Bayside, a special welcome to you. My name is Mark. I am one of the pastors here at the church. And if you are new, man, cool, because I am too. So if you're here, I've literally been here for about 2.5 months, man. So if you're here and you're here for the relationship series, the marriage series, whatever you're here for, someone dragged you here, whatever, I'm super glad that you're here. We're glad you're here. Hopefully you feel welcomed. We have a lot of stuff, a lot of content to get to. This is the first message in a series on marriage and relationships that we are doing as a church. It goes 7 weeks. We actually have a booklet for you guys that you can grab on your way out and bring it back. Every week there's tons of opportunity to write notes and all that kind of stuff for all 7 messages in this series. Super excited that you are all here. We're going to talk about everything from relationships, parenting, singleness, how to flourish in the context of our marriage and other kind of relationships. Next week we're doing conflict and communication. We have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about in this series. So invite a friend, invite people that you know. And it's not like invite people who are like, oh my gosh, their marriage is a disaster. Let's bring them. I mean, they need to be here too. But invite people whose marriages are flourishing because it's all about tweaking these things so that we can actually flourish. So here's why we do a series like this, because 95% of people still get married and 100% of you guys are in relationships at some level. Friendships, even if you're single, there's friendships and there's all kinds of things that we need to get through so that we flourish and thrive versus just survive in our life. That's our heart as a church. I've been a pastor for 25 years. I know you're like, no way. I'm serious. I know I look 12. And I've done a lot of marriage counseling in those years. I've done a lot of premarital counseling. I've worked with couples through these things that we're going to explore in 7 weeks. And really, here's the thing. There was this poster, a beer poster that I saw years ago hanging outside the front of a restaurant. It had a big frothy mug of beer in the front of it. Some of you are like, let's get out of here. Shut up, let me talk. And so it said, I would rather die of thirst than drink from the cup of mediocrity. I love that. That is Bayside's philosophy in regard to your spiritual life. We don't want you to be mediocre. We want you to actually flourish in life. And so that's why we're doing a series like this. So now, of course, all of us go through things in our life. Some of you have been through divorces. Some of you have been, there are a million asterisks when you do a series like this. What we're trying to do is hit those kind of 30,000 foot principles and guides for life. So everything we say, of course, is gonna have, but my situation was different. Might have been an abuse situation, might have been a real, we're not talking about the thing, we're trying to hit at 30,000 foot kind of principles. Think about this series almost like you read the book of Proverbs. When you read Proverbs, it says stuff, but it's like, raise a kid in the ways of Jesus and they're always gonna love Jesus. It's like, I know 14 kids where that's not true. It's like the book of Proverbs is giving you kind of high level principles principles that if you follow them, you have a better chance of flourishing and thriving in the context of your relationships. And so that's the whole point of this, and that's why we do what we're going to do in this series. So we're glad that you're here. 7 weeks, we have to begin. Before we get to all the hows, all the pragmatics, we have to talk about the purpose of marriage. We have to get to the why. What is marriage about? It's what I talk about, the mission of marriage, the idea that you actually have a mission from God, and you got to understand the purpose of a thing. If you try to grab a hammer and cook with it, it's not going to do well. Why? Because a hammer wasn't designed to cook. If you go to something and try to use it in a way that it wasn't designed for, you will completely hack it and mess it up. This is what people do in the context of marriage. They don't understand what marriage is for, and so they try to use it for things it was never designed for. So if you got booklets or you got handouts in your notes, you can just take notes as I'm talking. I'm gonna hit you with a whole bunch of content, and you can come back to it later. But there's two major things our culture tends to do with relationships. There are two extremes. On the one hand, our culture tends to look at relationships too flippantly. Right? So it doesn't matter. I'm just a body. I can meet you. Hey, I swiped right. I met you on Tinder. We met in a Wendy's. Hey, let's go sleep together. Boom, done. That's too flippant, right? But then others of us actually take some relationships too serious, meaning we try to get too much out of them. It's what psychologists call an apocalyptic romance, meaning you try to get out of your marriage all meaning, all purpose, all value, all joy, and your marriage was never designed to do that. The only one who's big enough to take all of that kind of worship is God himself. And if you look to your spouse to try to get all your meaning, all your passion, give me life, give me joy. You will crush them, by the way. If I woke up every morning and Erin was sitting, my wife's name is Erin, I got 3 daughters for those of you who are new, and if she was like awake already staring at me, right? I like woke up, she was like, give me meaning, give me purpose. I'd be like, I would run away pretty quick because that expectation on me would crush me. And so there's two things that happen. When you believe Tom Cruise's philosophy, when he looks at Renee Zellweger and says, you complete me, all right? What happens is that person can never complete you, right? Only God can actually do that. So what happens is you try to derive meaning, purpose, value, and joy from somebody, you're disappointed, and you end up crushing them. And that's the problem. And so we can never look to those things in order to actually get our joy, get our purpose. Only God can do that. And that's gonna be a theme as we go through these things. The Bible comes along and pushes back against both of those extremes and says this beautiful thing. Genesis chapter 2 says that God saw Adam, he puts them in the garden, he looks and he says, it's not good for man to be alone, right? And if you look around at every man in this room, you'll go, amen, right? It's not good for man to be alone. This is going to be a disaster. And so he gives him a woman, and we're gonna see the purpose of why he ends up doing that. But this is the beautiful thing about marriage. And even if you're single, if you're a high school kid, if you're dating, the next 7 weeks, this is stuff to be writing notes about because this is about who am I going to be when that day comes? How do I start to prep myself now so I'm the kind of person who understands that when I get married, when I walk in, because here's what marriage is. He says, it's not good for man to be alone, and he does their ceremony in this garden, Adam and Eve, and he's saying for the rest of time, this is what it means. It means that you look around at the world and you've covenanted yourself to one other person, which means you're looking at the 2-3 billion other options and saying, out of all of you, I have decided to give my life to, I have decided of the billions of people, I've decided to fight with you the most, right? I've decided out of everyone else, I can have all levels of low-level dysfunction with 7 billion people. But with you, baby, I decided the highest levels of dysfunction are gonna be right here. And you've excluded everybody else from that reality. That is what marriage is. It's God saying, okay, now here you are, and you're to be a picture, Ephesians 5 says, about Jesus to the world now. That your marriage is a parable. It's a picture of the gospel where you forgive each other. I do so many weddings and grandma always gets up and reads like 1 Corinthians 13, love keepeth no record of wrongs, whatever. And And you sit there and you gotta how do you keep no record of wrongs? Because you wake up every day and you say every day you gotta wipe the slate clean. And you're never heard saying, last month you did this, last week you did this. That's the only way to function, because that's what Jesus does with you every day. And so you then start to extend that to the person you're married to. So this is what it is. So what are the 3 things that marriage is? Relationships in general, but marriage as the peak, because all of relationship is on a continuum, right? You have a relationship with the mailman. That's one kind of relationship, with the male person, sorry. And then you have a relationship with your spouse. Well, hopefully those are on different levels on the continuum, right? Or else we got problems. All right, so how do we ultimately thrive in marriage and relationships? We gotta hone in on 3 things that a marriage actually is. And psychologists tell us this, Christians, non-Christians, also the Bible tells us these 3 things. And we decided to frame this as Kevin Thompson, our married life pastor, awesome thinker, has a great book, and we decided to frame this message around the 3 things that he says marriage is, because they're biblical and all the psychologists talk about them as well. Friends, partners, and lovers. All right, you can get his book in the bookstore. Just every time you buy one of his, you gotta buy 2 Problem of Gods. That's the rule. So here's the deal. First, we have the idea of friends, all right? This is the first thing that your marriage is. This is taken from Genesis 2, verse 18. The Lord God said, it's not good for the man to be alone. We all said amen. And I will make a helper suitable for him. And so this word suitable, it's like this, like they actually like each other, right? They walk together. There's a matchedness, there's an attachedness. This is super important, and it tends to be a neglected reality when we talk about our marriages in particular, that friendship would be a thing that you actually have to go after. John Gottman, who runs this institute in Seattle about marriage, the guy can sit with you for 15 minutes and decide within a 96th percentile whether you're gonna be married within 2 to 3 years, and he gets it right almost every single time. And he says, in all of his books, he says that the number 1 thing marriage has to be is friendship. It has to be. Meaning, you have people that you kind of, I remember I was Aaron and I traveled to Dallas a few years ago. I was speaking at a thing, and we were walking down the road. We were doing some shopping. And as we shopped, I remember we were holding hands and kind of going through it. I know, And she just looked at me and she went, we know so many people who define most of their life by their kids. And when their kids grow up and go, they don't know what to do with each other. They really don't know, and they don't really like each other. They just kind of have existed. And she goes, you and I are gonna be okay because we actually like each other. We love traveling away from the kids. I'm like, dear Lord, do I like traveling away from the kids. And she's like, we have a life together where we actually like each other. And this, as basic as it sounds, is actually one of the crucial things to shoot for in life, because some of you have actually you have this covenant mentality where, well, I've covenanted myself to someone and that means I'm gonna be there till my dying day. And it's like, yeah, but is it any good? Right, you have the duty mentality, right? It's my duty, I said I'd do it and I'm with her for life. It's like, that's not a goal. We want you not to be married out of duty, but to shoot for the goal of delight. Right? Where you actually go, I actually like this person. And it's not always easy, it takes work. I remember when I first got married, I was 23, and my style was I would go out every single night. So I would go hang with my buddies, we'd play cards, we'd go down at the lake. I was just that guy, I was always busy. And then I got married, and we dated for 5 years, and that was fine. We knew each other pretty well, which I wouldn't suggest when we get to the dating week. Oh, some ideas. But we get to that, and I remember we were married, and it was the first night we were married, so everything had settled down, and we're sitting there, she's like, well, what are we gonna do tonight? I'm like, tonight? Oh, we gotta hang, and she gets her feet and puts them under my legs, and we sit on the couch, and we just did something benign. She turns out like Survivor, and gets the kettle going, and it's I just can't wait to settle in for this night. And I freaked out. I freaked out. I hadn't sat inside watching television with a cup of tea in my life. It's like, I want to change the world, man. Let's go out and do stuff. This sounds boring. And so the first couple of years of our life, and I remember when we moved to Vancouver, she's like, finally, I have you away from all your friends. I'm going to get you. I swear, 3 days later, I was at a card game. I met some guy in a store. He's like, want to come play cards? I'm like, sure, let's go. And my wife's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to escape this. See, this is what we tend to do, is that it's not always easy to actually be friends. But here's what you actually need when it comes to friendship, guys. You actually need passion for that person. Being a neutral force in your spouse's life is not enough. And being a negative force in your spouse's life is not what you're actually looking for. What you're looking for is to be a positive force. What you're looking for is to constantly say, I am gonna build up this person, because the goal, so I'm not always the easiest guy in the world to live with. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I think I am, but once in a while, I remember my old assistant she said to me one day, she's talking to Aaron and I, she's like, sometimes I'll be driving around and I'll just start to pray for Aaron. And I'm like, what does that mean? What an offensive thing to say. Like, what about praying for her, bro? This thing is... So she prayed. I don't know why that would be the case. But anyways, once in a while, I might not be the easiest guy. Like when we moved here, I remember a couple weeks ago, she said, just remember, because we had all this garbage because we had just moved. She's like, you got to remember the dump truck is coming in the morning. But back in Vancouver, it came on Monday morning. So I had a rhythm. Right? And so here it doesn't come on Monday. So I'm sitting in bed, and maybe this has happened to you, and I'm woken up to that sound, right? Right? That, and I'm like, no! And I ran down, and I'm like literally running after the guy with my garbage. I'm like, please take it, please take it. And the guy just like, whatever, bro, he's gone. And I went back in, and she's just standing there in her robe like, are you an idiot? I'm like, yes. So I'm not the easiest person in the world, but here's the reality, guys. I got no bigger cheerleader in the world than my wife. No bigger cheerleader. No one wants me to succeed more than her. No one is more positive in my life than her. And that's the kind of thing that it takes to actually flourish. It's that we're actually friends. It's that you look at your spouse and go, I hate you, but I love you more than anything. And the problem is, the subtitle for this message is why women get it wrong and husbands don't get it. And I'll tell you why that's true. Because you're all just looking for technique. You're all looking for love languages. You're all looking for all these little techniques to solve stuff. And that ain't the way to do it. You've neglected your friendship. That's what's gonna save it. It's to go, how do I like this person? How do I flourish with this person? How do I walk through life with this person? Now, let me talk to each of these. I'm gonna talk about one of the challenges of how you're gonna do this well. So we're on friendship. What are the challenges that we face in the context of friendship? Well, one of them is the fact that you're different, right? Men and women are just different. Right? The Bible talks about this all the time. Ephesians talks about this idea and Genesis talks about this. Male and female, I created them. So that's not a political statement. That's just science. I created males and I created females, and those males and females function differently. Kevin and I were talking the other day, and he said, because he's doing one in a couple of weeks, about the differences between husband and wives and how we function. And he was talking to a secular psychologist in a university a couple weeks ago and said, what is the research saying about the difference between men and women? Are there differences scientifically? And he said, yeah, there's about 6,000 differences that we can figure out between men and women. So let's just talk about a couple of them, because it's pretty important that we figure it out. Dr. Elizabeth Carroll in her book, Marriage Boot Camp, says this: we have found that relationship problems can often be traced to the differences in our gender traits. It's just a reality. So if you think, and again, I'm thinking of 30,000 foot principles here, but if you think of most boys versus most girls, you'll notice that most girls are more nurturing than boys, especially if you watch like I got 3 daughters. Those daughters have changed more diapers and hung out with more babies than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And they did it when they were in diapers. You could have handed those kids a gun and they'd wrap it in a blanket and be like, right? Now that's my daughters. I'm not saying that's always the case, but that's my daughters, okay? Now what tends to happen is like guys, what tends to happen for most men is the first diaper you ever change is your own child's, right? Like nobody just hands a 14-year-old boy their kid and goes, okay, you have fun then, okay. Like it's pretty rare because women tend to be a little bit more nurturing. It's that mothering, the bear instinct, right? It's the mother bear, it just goes. Like a kid's in trouble, a dad's like, shoot, that looks dangerous. And the mom's like, pulling the kid up from the water or whatever. So I remember, if we were going down in a boat, my wife would somehow she would drown while all three of my kids would be on her back surviving. That's how she is. Where I'd be like, which kid looks the floatiest? That's just not how I think. I remember when I had my first daughter, Sienna, the first time I took her to this public pool. It's a true story. She was 1 year old and we went swimming and I had only brought one towel. And I'm sitting there in this freezing cold locker and I'm looking at her and she's like a little squirrel with these big eyes and she's just like shivering. And I'm like, man, where'd they get more towels around here? I don't know what's going on. Why is this place so cold? I don't get it. It's just the reality. Now, let me explain something about the way that our brains work between men and women. This is a true story. If you read Dr. Luann Brisendine's book, The Female Brain, which I had to read because I had 3 daughters and I had to try to figure out how women think. It's a very thick book. Just kidding. So it's called The Female Brain. So here's what it says. And this is from a psychologist. This isn't some Christian nonsense. This is a psychologist talking about what happens in utero inside of a male and a female's brain. So here's what happens. You have the brain and you have testosterone when you're in utero that floods the brain of a male, right? And then you have estrogen that floods the brain of a female. So that's in utero, and so what happens is we have a left and right hemisphere of the brain, and the bridge that connects the left and right hemisphere of the brain is called the corpus callosum, and it's the highway that connects your brain so that it functions properly. This is science, what I'm about to say to you, okay? Don't use this as a weapon, I'm just explaining science. So, what happens when estrogen floods the brain of a woman is that it enhances the ability for the corpus callosum to communicate between left and right hemisphere. Just enhances it. It makes it an absolute superhighway of information. And every test that's ever been done shows that women are smarter than men. Just is. I told you, idiot. All right, so it just is what it is. Now, here's the problem. Estrogen floods the brain of a woman and it enhances the superhighway of communication. What do you think happens when testosterone floods the brain? Destruction. Absolute destruction of the corpus callosum. So for a woman, you have a superhighway. We're talking about 400 cars, 18 lanes, there's information passing, everything's connected. And then there's the testosterone. It floods the brain, it brings in sex and aggression, which can be really good when you're 200,000 years ago and you're trying to protect your tribe and have babies because you want the husband to just keep pursuing and be aggressive. But the problem is it destroys the corpus callosum. The left and right brains aren't connecting. That's why he looks in the fridge like, oh, I don't see it. I don't know where it is. I don't know. I don't know. And you just walk by like, here, boom, idiot, right? And it's like, what? Because he just had to go like that. But that's the brain. It's been corroded by total So you guys are superhighways. Guys are old jalopies just going down a country road like, I hope I don't fall off. That is what you're seeing. So here's what happens. When that takes place, there's complete, basically the picture is this. One writer puts it this way. It's a male brain is basically like a bunch of boxes in a garage that don't touch each other, okay? That's why at any moment, kids can be crying. It's like, you wanna do it, right? And it's like, the kids are crying. The kids are crying. One might be dying. And you're like, so is that a no or is that a maybe? What is that? Like, because that's compartmentalization. Everything gets compartmentalized. But for a woman, everything's connected. So it's not boxes in a garage. It's like the Christmas lights are all tangled up. And the budget is connected to the sex, is connected to the kids, everything's connected together. And so these are just different realities that every single one of us face. This is a quote from a psychology book. Men's brain activity can actually flatline. That's a truth. I didn't make that up. That's an actual doctor. Where women's, she goes on to say, cannot. It can't ever flatline. So you know when you're just staring out the guys, that's like the best time of the day where you just think about nothing. Women, that's not possible. They never think about nothing, which is why they're stressed and anxious because they're thinking about 5 years down the road. And you're just like, you're so compartmentalized, you're so focused, which throughout history has a lot of good and here's the point to this. Both of these things are actually good because men need to function like this. Women need to actually function like this. And here's a phrase that I want to keep coming back throughout this series. Not wrong, just different. What happens is you can either look at the way God created men and women in the garden and go, oh my goodness, that's wrong. You're wrong. That's a worse way of doing it. Or you can go, man, the fall happened. We can totally mess this up. Or we can have a pure version of this. But this is friendship. So the thing that's going to fight against your friendship is the recognition that you're actually different. And you need to try to fight through those differences. Okay. Ooh, we are going to run out of time. That was just point number one. Friends. Okay. Let's get on to the second point about partners. Okay, so now you're friends, great. What about partners? Seems like a weird word to use, partners. Comes from, again, Genesis 2, where you have the helper. I'm gonna give him a helper, and this is not some kind of equality thing. This isn't that she's less. The word helper is used of God all throughout the Old Testament. It's this concept that you have this is the best version of it I can tell you. A helper is because Adam couldn't accomplish the massive mission that God had for him. Outside was wild and waste. You're in the garden, it's perfect. I want you to bring the perfection and bring it out to the wild and waste. Subdue things. I want you to bring the reign of God into the world, and you can't do that on your own. So I need men and women together reflecting my image in the world. You know that part of the reason you're fighting is because you don't have a big enough mission in your marriage. You're not like, hey, how do we do kingdom stuff? Because that's what God wants you to use. Your money, your house, your hospitality, your things to actually bring people to Jesus versus just sitting around going, hope I can get a new kitchen and we can figure out our love languages. That's not a vision for your life, right? And the reason you're fighting is because that's the only vision you've got. In a war, when the Germans, who are always the enemy, I guess, still in my head, right? No offense if you're from Germany, but you have created some issues throughout history. If you're fighting the Germans, all right, and they just halt up for a month or two, what starts to happen? You start fighting each other, right? Because you don't have the enemy to fight. And so, guys, your spouse ain't your enemy. Satan, sin, and death is your enemy. And together, he has given you the mission to use your gifts and your experiences and your passions together. You can't accomplish it just as a male. You can't accomplish it just as a female. That's the point. Tim Keller talks about the beautiful reality of marriage is that when the male and female come together, it fulfills your portfolio in a way that I would only think as a man. But once I've become one with a woman, now I start to think like her. And there's parts of God, those feminine parts of God that actually I start to go, my gosh, I never had, like, how much marriage counseling have I done with somebody where a 25-year-old kid sits like, I watch porn, I got no motivation in my life to get a job, and I don't like to get up early. And all I want to do is go, dude, first stay away from my kids. Secondly, wake up early, take a cold shower, pull your pants up and get a life. That's my pastoring. But before I say that, I hear Erin in my head. And she goes, I wonder what this guy's experience is of life. And then I say, let me pray for you, bro. So I just think all that still, but then I pray for him. Because she has filled out my portfolio as a human being. That's what marriage does, right? It fills us out. This is the partnership. God has created them male and female. And so we have this covenant that God has given to us, and it says, till death do us part. What God has joined together, Jesus said, let man not separate. This is the perspective you gotta have when you're going through tough times, guys. When this partnership starts to get challenged, it's that don't picture yourself as a mid-30s broke person who kids are kicking around all the time, and you're looking at your friends on Instagram who seem to be living a perfect life, and you're frustrated with it. Don't picture that. Have a long game perspective that picture yourself at 85 with grandkids, and you did it, you got there. That's the legacy. That's what you gotta remind yourself of in those moments where you're like, this partner of mine isn't acting like much of a partner. He's a disaster, she's a disaster. It's like, okay, what about when we're 90? Can we make it till we're 90? Marriage is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Now, here's one of the things that can actually get in your way of partnership, and it's communication. I'll explain this to you really quickly. So psychologists tell us that there's two ways, and next week, Kurt's gonna be talking about communication and conflict. So you gotta make sure you bring a friend back for that. Gonna unpack a lot of really helpful stuff. But here's one thing about communication that threatens a partnership. Psychologists tell us there's two kinds of communication: logical and emotional. Logical and emotional. Now, here's what I mean by that. Logical is informational, right? So the sky is blue, I'm wearing socks. These are things that are just information. It's just giving you, truth statements. There's no emotion, there's just logic. But then there's emotional, which is not so much about information, but it's affirmation. What does this information mean? And the problem is if you are speaking logically about something and the person is interpreting it emotionally, this is when problems begin to happen in regard to communication. Have you ever been in that scenario? Right? If I come home and I go, Aaron, where are we going this has happened. Where are we going for dinner tonight? Is that a logical or an emotional question? I'm just asking the room. Logical, thank you. So it's a logical, where are we going to dinner, man? I just data. What time, what's the place? Well, you don't think I cook well? We've already been out 3 days this week. What are you saying? You don't think I can organize the food enough? You think I'm gonna poison the kids? What? And then I'm lost. A logical question has been interpreted emotionally, not about information, but about affirmation. And this is what happens all the time. I'll give you a couple of examples. When a woman says, do I look good in this dress? Don't think. Because now you're doing logical stuff. She ain't asking because of that. It's about affirmation. It's about look at me. It's about pay attention. It's about attention. One of the surveys, and you guys should all take the survey for the next 6 weeks. One of the big things that Kevin was talking to me that the survey is showing is the lack of attention. The lack of connectivity is the biggest thing that Bayside is feeling in the context of their marriage. So a husband says, do you think I work hard? No, I heard Sarah down the street. She told me Joe makes way more money than you do. So I'm just saying, numbers are numbers. He's not asking for information. He's looking for affirmation. It's an emotional question, man. Am I doing okay? Do you respect me? That's how a guy thrives. Like me, and I won't say this, I don't care about love. In the sense of I get it. I woke up, Aaron was there this morning. I'm good. You love me. What I need is respect, right? This is what Paul talks about Ephesians 5. What I pine for is, do you respect me? Or do you sit around with your friends and slam me? Because that's what kills me. And I've had guys crying in the fetal position on my couch in my office because their wife don't respect them. People around them don't respect them. So here's the challenge. You gotta become bilingual in logical and emotional responses. Guys, you gotta figure out and exegete these right. So let me give you 2 or 3 examples and you guys tell me logical or emotional, okay? Where are my car keys? Logical. Logical. There's no need to go, you love that car more than you love your family, right? No one's asking for your emotional commentary. I just need to know where the stinking car keys are. Okay, so we got that one. You guys are good. Logical. Am I the best lover you've ever had? Don't start thinking. Right? Oh, there was a girl in high school. No. It's not a logical question. Right? It's emotional. All right, last one. Would you marry me all over again? Can you imagine being with anyone else? These are questions. Trap! It's a trap! It's a trap! When he looks at you and says, honey, don't you remember in high school when I scored that touchdown? Just say yes. And it was amazing. It was amazing. Don't be like, it's been 30 years. What have you done lately? All right, that's not a thing. He's trying to impress you. Look, if you came with a guy, if you came with a husband, don't do this to a stranger. Just grab him. Just grab him right here. Grab him right here really quick. Grab him right here. What did he do? What did he do? He flexed. He flexed. What the heck is that? Why? Right? Just doing this is logic. There's no need for, I'm strong. Because we're emotional beings. We're wrapped up in a meta-narrative where we're heroes and we're important. And we want every action to mean something. And so there's logical and there's emotional communication. Now, let me just tell you one last thing about this. Unresolved conflict, if you're taking notes, is the second thing that can fight partnership properly. Unresolved conflict. Here's what Gottman says. He says the reason people divorce is not because they fall out of love, it's because of unresolved conflict. And he says it's not about the increase in conflict. This is very important. It's not about the increase in conflict. Some people go, we fight a lot. Aaron and I fight all the time because we're two tigers. We fight all the time. And by the way that you fight, it doesn't matter about, I'm not gonna get up here and tell you how to fight. You fight how you fight, right? John Gottman talks about this in his book. He says, there's this couple that he studied, married 60 years. When they fight, she goes shopping, he watches ESPN, and they never talk about it again. And they're flourishing. And they hope their kids have half the marriage they have. It's not like you have to sit down eye to eye. Let's rip it all open and talk about 12 years ago when you said that thing to my brother. It doesn't have to be that way. Some of you are like, you know what? We'll never talk about that thing again, but we're perfectly happy, which is why people oftentimes are nervous about marriage. Kevin talks about this often when he loves on you guys and gives marriage content. People are sometimes afraid to come to church and do marriage because they're like, everything's fine right now. I don't need to start ripping open wounds, right? You're gonna come home and okay, what are we talking about today? No! That's not the way you have to do this. The partnership comes the way that, who are you guys? How are you wired? How does it work? The issue isn't increased conflict. Listen to me. It's decrease in affection. It's when the emotional responses stop. That's when you gotta get nervous. It ain't about, if you're fighting, at least you care. It's when the fighting stops that you gotta become nervous. When you try to poke them and they just cruise. So Dr. Gary Roseberg says this, the lack of emotional responsiveness rather than the level of conflict is the best indicator of how fast a marriage or relationship will decline. Focusing on what you're not getting out of the relationship and how your partner fails to live up to your expectations can kill your marriage in 2 to 3 years. It's the emotional divorce. Okay, and then lastly, really quick, and we're gonna be doing a whole week on this. Andrew's gonna be preaching on this in a few weeks. Lovers, my favorite topic, but I don't have any time left. Okay, Genesis talks about this. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. He puts them naked in a garden and tells them to go have a lot of babies to fill the earth. This is the God we're talking about, guys. Come on. if you're new at Bayside and you're not a Christian, this is the God we're talking about. The God who goes, I took two people and I didn't suggest it. I went, be fruitful and fill the whole earth with a bunch of babies and you're buck naked. Go. Like there's nothing in the way. There's no kids around. This is the God we're talking about. Be fruitful, multiply, which isn't going to happen by having sex once a month. It's not. You're going to have a whole bunch of babies and fill the earth and subdue it. I want there to be a good rhythm to your sex life. Go read 1 Corinthians 7. Paul says maybe you stay apart for a little bit, but once the tempter starts coming, you got to be careful with that. You got to make sure you have a healthy sex life where lover is actually a core part of the identity of what God has set up for you and I to do. And I can tell you, I've had grown men crying many, many times over the fact that their sex life sucks and they don't know what to do because it impacts their work life, their social life, the way they make money. It impacts everything. And so if this is part of your life that's a sensitivity, it's on both of you. You gotta lean in, get counseling for this. Don't just sit on this and let this go. This is important. But I'll say this for a couple minutes before I pray for you. I'll say this about the lover aspect. Some of you are skeptics. You might be like, I don't want anything to do with Christianity because, you know, God is anti-sex. The Bible's anti-sex. They're not into sex. God, you know, he just likes, you know, just procreate, you know, keep the lights off, don't have any fun. It's utilitarian and then that's it. And you've heard all these negative things about the church and how it views sexuality. You know, the Virgin Mary, she's like venerated. I remember as a kid, I was like, I don't want to become a Christian. Like, why? Because the Virgin Mary is your hero. And the key word in that is virgin. And that's the one thing I don't want to be. So let me just blow that up for a couple minutes here by telling you what the Bible actually says. Now, just quick reminder, this is just me reading the Bible. Proverbs chapter 5. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. A lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always with her. Song of Solomon. I'll give you a couple quotes in Song of Solomon. Which, if you were a Jewish boy, you couldn't read until you were 14. The Song of Solomon, guys, is hot. Song of Solomon is a sex book that one guy has written to his lover and she writes it back and they're poetically going back and forth and it's hot. Like tonight, guys, if you're married, go home, light a candle, get a glass and just read each other's Song of Solomon. I remember I was prepping for a marriage talk one time at a church and I was reading Song of Solomon in my office and the secretary walked in. I was like, bah! Hey, I was like, oh gosh, sorry. I got nervous. Your breasts are like clusters of fruit. I will climb that tree and take a hold of that fruit. I am just ready for Ray to walk out here any second, but okay. Let me just finish. Your belly is a heap of wheat. Now that takes some translation in regard to the culture. Don't just take that one right off the... Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your eyes are the pool of Heshbon. Your breasts are like two fawns, like twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Come, my love, let's go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. They want to go outside. Right? This isn't just like, this ain't a denim dress and they churn their own butter and have sex once a year like the people in Auburn. This is... This is risky. Let's go outside into the stars. Let's go in the villages. Let's pour into each other's life. Now, of course, there's an ecosystem here. You got to emotionally connect in order to physically connect, right? As Kevin often says, and my wife quotes him, hey, you want to have sex? Put your socks away. I'm like, how are those two things connected? But they are, right? They are. Because it's an ecosystem of life together. So here's the beautiful thing about the Song of Solomon, guys. And if you're a skeptic, what I just read to you, this is the Bible, right? God doesn't break in and goes, oh, shut that up, kids. Why are you talking so dirty to each other? And it's not even about procreation. As one writer I was reading said, never in Song of Solomon does he go, ooh, your belly's like wheat. I'm gonna put a baby in there. He never, procreation is never part of it. It's just pleasure in Song of Solomon. So sex is for procreation, pleasure, protection from evil. Because Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 7, the idea that Satan will come and actually tempt you in your life. Now, I have much more to say about that, but here's the point. Let me give you what I think is the most important verse in the Bible in regard to your marriage so that it flourishes. Philippians chapter 2, and I'll end with this. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the other. You wake up every single day and say, I'm put on this earth to think of my spouse as more important than myself. Who goes first? Yes. Yeah, who's supposed to move first? Yes, you. What about him? Yes, him. What about her? Yes, her. You wake up in the morning and you say, I am put here on this earth to actually love and serve the person I'm married to. Guys, I love Erin more than anything, but here's the thing I love about her the most. My job, this whole context of this passage in Philippians 2 is that Paul's talking about Jesus and how Jesus incarnated and came down and lived a perfect life and died on a cross, even the death of a cross, and then he rose again. You know what the most important thing about my life is? I love my wife dearly and I want to give her a good 30, 40 years on this planet. But I really want her to have 40 million years after that. And the 40 million years after that, where she loves and treasures Jesus because she's in his very presence. And my job is to help her unto that end. And so every single day of your life, part of your job is to help your spouse treasure Jesus more. And so here's the thing, you're here and you're going, how do I make my marriage better? The thing is, the best thing for your marriage is that you come to know Jesus. And if you already know him, that you treasure him because he'll teach you how to make her or him more important than yourself. Because he changes how you feel. He changes your affections. He changes what you want to do. And at this point, some of you are too selfish to ever want to do this, to put your spouse above yourself. But Jesus is the one who died on a cross, rose again, gave us sex, gave us partnership, gave us friendship, said, this is how I designed all of you. This wasn't an accident. This is the God who loves you, who wants to draw you to himself. And for some of you, you got to know the best thing you can do, the secret to a good marriage is not to pursue a good marriage, but to pursue Jesus himself. So let me pray for us to that end. Lord, we are in need, desperate need of your grace, desperate need of your love and desperate need of your guidance to be able to flourish and thrive in the relationships you've given us, whether we are dating, whether we're prepping ourselves for this moment of marriage that we might have one day. Maybe we're single and we're loving and pastoring other people, whatever it is. Some of us are here and we're broken. Maybe we're in a divorce scenario. Maybe our marriage is struggling right now, or we know people that it is. God, do a work, speak, and let us actually hear you. Pastor us, counsel us, love on us right now, and let us know that you came to die for our sin, to do the thing that we might have to do towards somebody else, which is forgive us. And that maybe that work starts here, and that you rose again to give us life so that we would flourish and thrive and not just survive in the context of our relationships. And so, Lord, let us leave here with a renewed focus on what you've called us to do. In Jesus' great name we pray. Amen. Hey guys, Pastor Mark here, one of the senior pastors around here. So glad that you are actually part of Bayside Online. You really are part of our family. We have grown over the last couple of years online a ton. and we really do consider you as part of our church family. So what that means is make sure you subscribe and share this. It's great. But also get in a community group. Start watching the Bible study. Start being engaged. Even give. One of the ways that we can actually do online church and have this global community and even do the ministry of our campuses is by people partnering with us in the gospel, as Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 1. And that means by your resources, financially, there are people all over the world getting blessed through what we do at Bayside. And so obviously part of that is giving and using and stewarding that for the glory of God. So we're super thankful if you do that. We'd love you to start doing that, and just super thankful you're part of our church. So glad you're with us. Make sure that you let us know you're watching and part of this, because we want to get in touch with you and thank you and serve you any way we can. Anyway, thanks guys, and we will see you next week.